Hey everyone, before we get into today's episode, I wanted to take a second to plug our favorite sponsor, Legacy Teas and Spices. If you're in the mood for hand-blended, loose-leaf teas and spice blends, some of my favorite, our favorite here. I already said that 3 times. But you can head over to legacyteasandspices.com and use promo code ISIMO20 for 20% off your order. Also, we know that you guys are used to us being funny and joking around, but this week we're covering the walkouts and the riots that happened in Mexico this weekend. Some more serious stuff. So we just want to let you know that there's not going to be a whole lot of joking, although we are very proud of this episode and we hope that you enjoy it. So take it away. Hello. And welcome to Isimo Podcast.
Yeah, my podcast.
My name is Dominic Angel.
My name is Gerardo Larcon.
My name is Ryan Reyes.
And thank you for joining us. Before we get into the episode, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Isimo Podcast. Rate and review on Apple and Spotify. Click subscribe, leave a comment below, and join us on our Discord. Join us on our Patreon. For just $5 a month, you get access to our Discord, and you get bonus episodes every week. And for $20 a month, you get your picture on our Jaritos board, and you get a shout out on the episode. Speaking of which, take it away, Gerardo.
Thank you, Dominic. Jose Morales, my little jabroni.
I like that name.
Nat Milo, Christian Alvarado, Leisha Ashley, Fantastic Fat Man, Alejandro, Serena, Zialtino, Isaí Facio, Alex Nunez, David Cerato, Yesenia Oropeza, Pedro, Alex Knotts, Nicholas Moreno, a.k.a. Calzoni. Fucking Ryan. Izzy Sandoval. Aparni Rani. Did I say Aparni Rani? Daria. Angelica Mora. Eddie Bravo. Nia Town. Veronica Lopez. Rosa Alarcon. And Kareem. We got a lot of Jaritos now, dude. And we'll be putting up more of your guys' pictures on the walls soon. My mom and my sister joined the Jaritos so they could put embarrassing pictures of me. So I'm trying to...
Oh, hell yeah.
Hell yeah. What do you mean?
I mean, if you get pictures, they'll put pictures of us too.
So just pictures? Fuck you, dude.
You're ugly.
Bitch.
But anyway.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. Today, episode is being released on March 9th.
It's so funny when you lead an episode, you just have to act like me.
Yeah, that's the only way I know how to do it. It's like lead by example kind of, or follow by example. Yeah. And so I'm like, but anyway... I like Chipotle. And I like to vape my jewels. But yeah, we're releasing this on March 9th, and I wanted to talk about something that I think is very important to Chicano history. March 6th was the anniversary for the East LA walkouts. Before I kind of explain what it is, did you guys know anything about the walkouts prior to this? Like me bringing it up?
I've known of them, but I've never before now looked into them.
I'm pretty sure somebody in school, meaning teachers wise, taught us about them. But it's just like Cesar Chavez is like a page in a book.
Yeah.
They usually gloss over it. Usually it's like somebody that's in Mecha or like a real Chicano teacher that's like, don't forget, fool. Yeah. Like you gotta know this shit, and then you forget. Yeah. Because they don't teach it to us. Because
what we're referencing today is Walkout, the movie, right?
So, yeah. We use the movie Walkout. It's on HBO Max. You can stream it right now. Great service.
Yeah. Go check out the movie. Come back and watch the episode, dude.
Yeah.
Wait.
But yeah, it's a Walkout is a dramatization of the East LA walkouts, which took place in March of 1968, and it was a orchestrated effort from the students in East LA, with including the schools Wilson, Roosevelt, Lincoln, and Garfield,
and Belmont,
right?
Yeah,
Belmont. I have a dupe. Sorry, but yeah, all of the blah. It was a movement that was orchestrated by students in 1968 for better educational conditions, including a push for bilingual curriculum, for more Chicano teachers, for healthier food, and just better conditions overall. And it's
Ryan's favorite subject, the bathroom.
the bathrooms.
Oh,
They made that a really big part of the movie, and it's like at the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
and it was like that is a reasonable thing to be like upset about. But every time she talked about it, she looked back at her friend at the beginning
Yoli?
who had to pee at the beginning of the movie. So
Yeah.
it felt like it was all for her.
Yeah.
And that was weird.
Yeah, the cool thing about this, so the basis of the protest, like the reason why they took place in the first place was because in the 60s there was a lot of gentrification, a lot of redlining. Chicanos at the time, the Chicano term was a slur, and Mexican Americans were getting pushed into neighborhoods like Boyle Heights, East LA, overall, and their schooling, a lot of kids were getting fed up because they noticed that they were being treated unequally. They weren't being pushed. And it's a funny thing because like I remember my grandma and my mom telling me all the time before I even saw this movie about how like my grandma's teachers used to say like, oh, take a typing class, like, or take a home ec class, go into become a mechanic. That's all they were telling Mexicans to do, was just to push for labor. And they weren't encouraging them to go to school, to pursue higher education or higher career options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird because it comes full circle now to where sometimes that's the better choice, is not to go to college.
No, for sure. I mean, at the time, I think college was more affordable, and then as time goes on, it gets more expensive and more predatory on students, particularly students of color that are poor, that can't really afford classes. Like they're like, oh, let's fucking jump on this and like get them loans and have them paying interest for the rest of their lives and shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's crazy now. And I think it's funny because after seeing this movie and after talking or after doing some research on this, like I kind of understand why like older generations like push college so much.
Yeah.
Is because a lot of things that we're like, you know what, like going to a vocational school is a better option. It's more profitable and stuff like that. And like, it's not necessary to just go to school and get in debt and all that shit.
Mm-hmm.
Is because a lot of these people, like your Tio Jorge, fucking like opened up his episode with like encouraging people to go to school. And that's because like that generation, they had to really fight for these things.
Yeah.
Fight for a lot of these opportunities that we have now. And I think we take that for granted a lot of times.
Yeah. Did you ever want to go to college, Ryan?
I did, actually, and I went for a few years, but it was a whole thing about where I wanted to go with my art. I couldn't go. It would take me a lot longer because I was like later in the elective season. So I was last to pick my classes, and so I would have taken like 8 years to finish like a 2-year school.
I remember when I was in high school, it did feel very weird because it was just like they just wanted you to go to any college.
Yeah.
Like they didn't care as long as a university, a 4-year, or a for-profit. They used to let like Arts Institute and like a lot of these like for-profit art schools come in and like try to encourage people to join them. But they literally did not give a shit what you went to school for.
Yeah.
They didn't push anybody like career-wise. They just pushed them go to school and like nothing more than that.
Did you go to college or no?
I didn't go to college. I took an aptitude test, and that's as much college as I ever took.
What's aptitude?
It's just like, or what is it? Placement test? Like when you go to apply, like I went to PCC and I applied, and then they make you take the math and the English test, and like I like passed both. I scored very high on both of them. And then I just fell through with any plans to go to college because I was like, I want to make movies. Yeah. So I started pursuing that instead because I was like, I instead of going to school and paying a bunch of money, I was like, I'm just gonna fucking work really hard and get on set and learn that way.
Did any of your brothers go to college?
My older brother did. He took college courses, and I think he got his associates.
Okay.
And then Ryan took some schooling, but I don't think you finished.
No.
Sorry for calling you out like
No,
that.
I literally just said that like a few minutes ago.
My bad.
Did you? So your guys' school had classes like mechanics, stuff like that.
Yeah. What's crazy is the school that we went to in Baldwin Park. Like, so in Baldwin Park, there's two high schools. There's Sierra Vista and there's Baldwin Park. And they're obviously, because they're the only two high schools, they're the rival schools. So they're always like competing with which school is better.
But they're like 4 blocks from each other.
Well, the thing is that like there was a running joke or like an inside gag that like Sierra Vista is where all the smart students went. And at first we were like, no, that's not true. Like we have like our valedictorian one year was like accepted to Princeton and Yale full ride and stuff. And but there was this thing where the city raised money for each high school to create like I forgot what the term that they used for it, but like a vocational programs. It wasn't a vocational program. It was just like they would have specialized buildings for certain things. And Baldwin Park, the school that we went to, got auto shop. They got like a state-of-the-art mechanic like auto shop, which was really tight. But then in comparison, Sierra Vista got a science center for like biology and for like hard sciences.
Like a whole new building.
Yeah, like a huge building, like
a 3-story building.
Yeah,
oh my God.
Dedicated to just like STEM.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's funny because it's almost like, even like when I was watching Walkout and like seeing how like they're pushing people, they would tell the Mexicans like, oh, you're gonna need to learn how to sew, you're gonna need to learn how to do this. I have like those feelings come back of like how our school like felt about the students.
Yeah. Another thing about Walkout was the teacher, Sal Castro.
Yep.
Did you guys look into Sal Castro at all after the fact?
I did a little bit of research, but what did you find?
I was more so like not what I found, but like, was there any Sal Castros in your life?
There was 3 teachers. One of them she's actually white. She was my English teacher, but she pushed us to follow like whatever we wanted. And she, you know, as much as a young white teacher could, she like encouraged us to like read. Like she taught like the English classics, but she encouraged everybody to read like things like Always Running and like Chicano books. And like I was able to do a report on Victor Villaseñor.
Yeah.
So that was cool. And then there was Mr. Villa, who taught history, who was kind of like Sal Castro, where he like made it a point to point out that like, hey, Mexicans were in every single American war.
Yeah.
And then I forget his name. His first name is Israel. Our parents' friend. It starts with a C. It starts with a C. We know him as Israel.
Okay.
But he was a history teacher as well, and he was the teacher. What the club master? I forgot what they're called. Of Mecha, which is the Mexican Chicano Alliance student, something like that. So because of him, we got to go to I wasn't in Mecha, but because he was friends with my mom, we got invited to go to a lot of their events, where we went to like Cal State San Diego, where they had like a Chicano education summit, where you got to take a lot of classes. And that's where I first learned about like connecting to my indigenous roots and stuff. It was pretty interesting. But it was cool just to like, I got to go to events where you got to listen to Chicano professors and professionals and like see other routes of education and career options as a student. That's
the thing too about Sal Castro was, dude, he was a great teacher. And so if you don't know the history of the walkouts, basically they walked out one day and then the cops were like, all right, fool, you want to do this shit, right? So they walked out the second day. Only 2 schools walked out the second day.
Right.
And those 2 schools got fucking beat to shit by the cops.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the crazy thing too was that like the students, it's so funny because everything that happened, my grandma told me about this already. And she was like, yeah, the cops came and were kicking the shit out of kids.
Yeah.
Beating them with sticks. And the news caught all of it.
Yeah.
But then when it hit the TV that night, all the footage that was shown was just people being arrested and loaded into cars.
Yeah.
And people climbing fences and stuff. And it was reported as like, oh, the students were being violent.
Yeah.
There was a violent protest. Thank God the cops were there.
Yeah.
To control everything.
Yeah. And they did that in order to scare the student body into not walking out anymore.
Right.
Which kind of just it made them just walk out again, I guess. And they did it for 5 days, right?
Yeah, it was 5 days total.
Yeah. Starting March 1st and ending March 6th.
No. So the first thing was there was already a movement building.
Yeah.
And so it kind of was like one of those accidents, you know, like the shot heard around the world thing that like, it's kind of like one of those key moments where on March 1st, there was a walkout that had nothing to do really with this education for all walkouts. These people were pissed because they canceled a play that was deemed like too risque for the students to perform.
Yeah.
And so those students got pissed. 200 students walked out. But
there was no coverage press wise.
There was no coverage. There was no nothing. And the people leading this Chicano movement saw that as an opportunity to capitalize on the momentum of that walkout. And so they used that. So on March 6th is when the rest of the walkouts began. And then it went on for 3 to 5 more days.
Yeah.
And it started on March 6th with 2,000 students, and it ended with some estimates range from 15 to 20,000 students from all the high schools in East LA.
And so the way that the movie depicted it was that the students got together and decided to do this walkout, the 5 schools. But Sal Castro was just like tagged along after the fact in the movie.
Right.
But in real life, Sal was kind of telling the students to do something, right? They had like that get together at some retreat or whatever.
Yeah. There was a student leadership retreat where kind of like what I went to in high school, which it was just like the top Mexican students got to meet each other from a bunch of different schools and learn about Chicanos in education. And so Sal Castro was like a prominent figure. He was kind of the mentor of everything. But there was the one thing I would kind of want to call out in the movie, which is a great movie, is that I feel like they didn't give Vicky Castro enough credit. She was one of the older. She's from UCLA. This is the only reason, or this is the only line where I'm like, you're gonna know who she is. Where she's the one that says "Viva la nalgas."
She says that
when they find out that there's a snitch, and then the brown beret guy goes "Viva la panza," and she goes "Viva las nalgas." It's so funny that's like they kind of portrayed her as like a person that's encouraging of everybody, but she was a key member.
Yeah.
She actually was one of the people. I found out this later was that she started the Young Chicanos for Progress movement, which later became, she was like a founding member of the Brown Berets. Yeah. Which, if people out there don't know, the Brown Berets were like the Chicano version of like the Black Panthers. They were a militant Chicano rights group.
But there is also, if you check out on This Cultural Life, they have an episode on Vicky Castro and her relationship, and like how at the same time she was falling in love while all these walkouts were happening.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't know about that. I heard about Bobby Verdugo and Yoli. I forget.
I think that's who it is. Bobby Verdugo and Yoli. My bad.
Whoops.
Were they the ones that one of them was the guy from Napoleon Dynamite?
Yeah, Bobby Verdugo.
Oh, Pedro.
It's so funny. So Bobby Verdugo was another student. He was a student leader in this movement, and they kind of portray him in the movie. It's Efren Ramirez. That's his name. Yeah. And they portray him as like a very silly, like, silly dude. Yeah. But that fool was a football player and was like very like big and like macho. Yeah. So it's just funny to see that. But what was dope is that fool went on to become a social worker, which I'm like, hell yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like, the movie's really well done. Walkout. Yeah. Right. Ryan noticed some more TV movie aspects.
It's a made-for-TV movie. Yeah. And we should point out that it was directed by Edward James Olmos, who has a reputation for being very ham-fisted when he comes to his messaging. But it's still really well done, and performances are really cool. And I didn't know this before, but Victor Villaseñor wrote the story that would become the script.
Wow.
So I was like, that's fucking cool.
Yeah.
Like, he's one of my favorite writers, and that he had a hand in it. There's so many people in this movie that it's like kind of unbelievable that this got done.
What's it called? But it's Ryan was pointing out so many of the made-for-TV movie elements
There was
of
just
it.
like small moments, like sometimes the accents were a little bit more forced. There's a scene at the very beginning when the kids are all meeting up.
Yeah, keep going.
Sorry, where the kids are all meeting up to go to the retreat, and one kid is like joking, like he's thrown out of his brother's car, like
Fernie.
"Fuck you, dude." Yeah.
Fernie.
And what's her name? Panavega. I forget her first name.
Paula.
Yeah, Paula. She looks at him and she goes, "You're going too?" And she like the J is so emphasized when she says it. It was like, that doesn't sound real.
Jello?
Jello. Shout out Chris Rock.
Literally, I rewatched it like twice to make sure. It was like, well, 100%. She goes, "You're going too?"
My favorite parts I liked it where I could not hold back laughter was Paulo's dad.
Yeah.
Because they made him such like
machismo,
like keep your head down, do the work, don't agitate. And he kept because they called the students agitators, and like Edward James almost was like, we need to fucking have agitator in this, because that's what they called us back then. And so every time the dad would be like, I told you not to hang out with those agitators.
He looks at the camera. I told you not to hang out with those agitators.
I love when she's like, agitators, and he's like, see, she's agitated.
See, she's agitating. That's what I said. And then also the fact that, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure that there was family dynamic or like this happen for a lot of people, but the fact that fool never was not in his janitor's uniform.
Yeah.
I was like, he showed up to the city council meeting in his uniform. I'm like, I get it. He's at home.
Yeah.
He's at work. Like, he's in other places. Like, I'm like, yeah, I've seen that before where it's like they're always in their uniform. But I'm like, this fool is at the fucking city council meeting in his uniform. Like, don't forget, this fool's a janitor. Fool.
Also, so since we're talking about the movie,
yeah,
another part of the movie that was one of my favorite moments of the movie was Fernie, that fool.
Yeah.
Which is short for what? Fernando?
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah. Sorry for wondering, Doug. When he was sweeping outside. So another one of the 36, what is it called? Demands the students had was that the students shouldn't be used as janitors for punishment, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So what was happening was they were using custodial duties as a form of punishment. So like instead of like having them stay for detention, they would have them sweep or clean bathrooms and shit like that.
Which at my school was still used as punishment because we were asked to scrape gum at the school.
That's fucking wild.
I never had to scrape gum. I probably did have to scrape gum.
I was a good student.
I was a good student with a 2.3 grade average. No, but what's it called? Oh, but that scene was awesome because Paula, it was made for TV, that whole scene, right?
Yeah.
Where Paula was watching from the upstairs window and like, oh my God, Fernie, no, right? And so she runs downstairs. And then she comes out and she goes, Fernie, just do it. Fernie, no.
Don't do it.
And then do your impression of Fernie in that moment. Like this.
I'm going to do it.
So he's like, pick up the broom, right? He picks it up and he throws it in the window. I'm like, that's me right there, Doug.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, dude. Would you guys ever throw a broom through a window ever?
No.
He broke the window.
And then he started smoking the window.
Yeah. I mean, that's fucked up. There's things that we hear a lot that I didn't realize. I kind of took it as like I accepted it just as base information, but like seeing it and hearing it more was with like how they had corporal punishment.
Yeah.
Specifically until this happened, literally like people were punished for speaking Spanish in the classroom.
Yeah, that's insane.
They were spanked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were given the same treatment if you were to be smoking on school grounds or truant from class. If you spoke Spanish in class,
Yeah.
then you were spanked in front of everyone.
Yeah, it was seen as disrespectful and like it's just crazy because it's like how paranoid are these teachers that they're like, I can't understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and then some schools, schools that didn't have to follow like the same regulations because they weren't public, kept that afterward. I remember in the 5th grade there was kids that were transferred from like Catholic and private schools that said, yeah, sometimes they still do that. It like takes a parent to call them out before they stop.
Yeah, it's wild. It's just like it's a thing where it's like disrespectful of children and like teens, of just like thinking that they're not able to make their own decisions or think or be rational, and like and just like they need to be submissive and all that stuff.
Yeah.
In one of the interviews of Sal Castro, one of the things that stuck out to me was he said that he would kind of argue, he would push back against the white teachers about like we shouldn't be treating the Mexican students like this. And one of the teachers responded like, he said, "Oh, Mexicans have a novel passivity that we don't want to change. You know, you don't want to change that. You want them to keep that.
Yeah,
because they don't want to deal with them." And that's a thing that I think ties in with like this immigration fear of this like this need for Chicanos to assimilate to American culture. That's why it's so crazy, like stuff we see even to this day. There's a internal struggle in the Latino community of like, what's the right way to be? Who's the right kind of Latino? You know, should we be the most American we can be, or, you know, should we hang on to our roots and stuff like that?
Yeah.
And it's crazy. See, this is where it all comes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was one part that I think how it's portrayed in the movie was a little hammy, but it was also like when they're at the beach, I think it was starts with a Y. Yoli, who was the one who was like, my father's not Mexican, he's from Boyle Heights. Like, that was his response. And that's like really how people respond, like when we talk like that in real life. Not even like when we started doing the podcast, like family members that we've talked to respond like that, where it's like, I'm not Mexican, I'm American, I was born here.
That's the thing too with we talked about this on one of the early episodes about the term Chicano, whether you identify as that or not.
Yeah.
And this movie basically tells you are Chicano. And then people over time have made some distinctions as to what a Chicano is.
Yeah.
But if you're Mexican American, you're a Chicano, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Like, that's one thing that I kind of, it reaffirmed that in me. I know that Chicano is closely tied with a specific movement, but that's also kind of what the movement was about. Is like, hey, don't forget, like, don't lose your identity because of the country that we live in.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're Chicano. Remember that, wear that with pride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about this, I guess, the movement, as far as it lives on today, it's the biggest Chicano cultural movement that's ever happened.
Yeah, it was, not only was it the biggest, but it was kind of the start of the Chicano power, Chicano pride movement.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that it was started by students.
Yeah.
You know,
imagine being 16 or 17 years old, dude, and being like, I'm tired of being treated this way, you know?
Yeah.
Where I was just thinking about Pokemon and shit like that. You know what I mean?
At 16?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's like I said, like now I kind of understand like my older teachers, my older like Mexican teachers that were like, you know, you need to get an education. Don't squander this opportunity, because they literally didn't have them at the beginning. Before this movement happened, they had these high schools in East LA had the highest dropout rate, particularly amongst minority groups, and even just in Los Angeles, in California, the acceptance rate or the student body percentage was only 2% Mexican or Latino.
Yeah.
And after this whole movement, it rose to 25 to 27%.
Acceptance rate at colleges.
Yeah. I think that was a really cool thing. They kind of touched on it in the movie, but it was like kind of skimmed over it where when they arrested everybody, they're like, what do we do now? And then they were like, here's the plan. And it was like literally just they're going to convince every single Mexican student to apply to college.
Yeah. Imagine living in the thick of it and still applying to college and trying to get an education and getting declined just because you're Mexican, you know?
Yeah. And thinking like, we don't want it.
Yeah.
And literally they're screaming like, we want education.
Yeah.
We want fairness. We want something more out of life than just being, a servant to somebody else. And, as time goes on, it's like we have respect for laborers. We have respect for people that didn't go to college and have these vocational trades, and because it's hard work. But when that's forced to be your only option, it's understandable to want more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were gonna say something and I cut you off.
Oh no, just watching the movie reminded me of something, and I wanted to ask you guys if you had this. My senior year, they were trying to. It wasn't like an official protest. It was in honor of the walkouts. But a lot of the teachers, by the time I was a senior, me and Dominic went to the same high school. By the time I was a senior, a lot of the teachers were Latino,
Mm-hmm.
so they were trying to orchestrate like memorial walkout,
Right.
like in honor of that. And I feel like they did that before. I wanted to ask you if they ever did that when you were.
They didn't do any type of walkouts or anything when I was in high school. They didn't even mention it, to be honest. There was other stuff that certain teachers taught us about, but the thing is I feel like by the time I was in high school, they wanted you to be proud of, especially that we were in the suburbs, that they want you to be proud of your culture, but they want their cake and to eat it too. They want you to be brown pride, but subservient. Mm-hmm. Like they didn't want us to rebel. They were like, the best way for you to rebel is to go to college. Mm-hmm. That was like their whole mentality. But I remember, like, even though my history teacher was Mexican, like the curriculum, like he had to remind us, like at the beginning of the movie where the teacher's like, oh, read the part where it says that 9,000 Chicanos were in the American Civil War, and she's like, it's not in here, and he's like, that's because they didn't put it in.
For reals.
Yeah. So it's like, it was literally stuff like that. Like my teacher had stuff on the walls, like posters and stuff reminding us that Chicanos were part of American history.
Yeah. One person. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, because you were one of you asked like who was kind of like that at our school. I feel like at least by the time before he left, by the time I was like a junior, the principal was kind of like that.
Not Cruz. You're talking about Huerta. He was a wrestling coach and he became an administrator. He became a dean and a vice principal.
Huerta sounds like a big fart. I'm sorry. Huerta. Echo Huerta, way.
People used to make fun of him.
Injustice,
He started a club for students to learn Aztec dancing.
Oh, I do remember that.
And he used to come out and give speech. People used to laugh at him because he was with his shirt off, and this is so funny. He wasn't that short, but he looked short because he was very stocky. He was like 6'2", but he looked like he was 5'6" because he was just so stocky. His proportions were just like big but short.
Yeah,
I don't know how to explain it, but he had this big broad back, and so one year they had a talent show, and so he came out and did an Aztec dance on his own. Yeah. And it was the first time people saw him without his shirt. And so he turns around to the school and he has the fucking Mayan calendar on his back, just like taking it up. And people were like, what the fuck? But yeah, he used to give speeches. He used to talk about how like that we're Chicano. He said like, a lot of you are Christians, but when you hear this music, when you hear the drum beat, that feeling that you get inside of you that resonates, that's your ancestors. Yeah. And he was like, the Aztecs invented the concept of zero. No other civilization had it.
Watch Coco.
There were actually, now that I think about it, because I remember he also found out that one of the football players was native, and he allowed that dude to do like.
Oh, Fanunu?
Yeah, at the beginning of every game, he allowed him to do. I don't know what you would call it. I don't want to.
He was Polynesian.
Oh, so they did the death dance or whatever?
He did I forget what it's called, Baka, is it, or something like that? I'm sorry for not remembering what it was, but
it's fucking sick.
Yeah, they would do that. They would do the chants and the dance, and like his name was Fununu. His last name was Fununu.
Right.
But he would lead, and like a bunch of other players supported him, and they would do that after every game, which was really tight.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to bring up was since, the biggest thing about, I don't know if it's so much education as it is Latino pride, Chicano pride. And I think that's what echoes from the walkouts themselves, right?
Yeah, because
it was about injustice as far as like, being treated correctly at schools.
Right. Because in the movie, they showed them making a lot more accomplishments than what happened in real life. In real life, it still took a long time for many of their demands to get met. But everybody credits this as being the kind of spark that ignited. Like that, it literally is the reason why the college population rose amongst Chicanos, and like it changed the way that Mexicans saw themselves.
Yeah.
And for wanting more, and for recognizing the oppression and the discrimination that we faced as a people. Yeah.
So I was going to ask you guys, what are some things that, if let's say we had all the power in the world, right? Like, what would we change that's still kind of, in a weird way, unjust as far as us appreciating our culture and heritage? Because I would argue that it's more brown on brown injustice now. Like, we get made fun of for not speaking English, or Spanish rather, and Spanish speakers get made fun of for not speaking English. Like, we were just at the Costco, and people treat people differently due to language.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's a big part of it. I do think obviously there's a lot of work that needs to be done within the community. The biggest thing kind of tying in, at least for me, in my opinion, is just the acceptance of Latinos in other spaces where we're not prominent. Because we have these interests, we have these skills, and it's still so hard for us to break out in these industries because people feel that, Mexicans, they're not a draw. They're not interested in Mexicans. Mexicans are not interested in this. People won't understand it. It's too culturally different. It's where we go into the forever immigrant of like us just being the most un-American.
You want to say anything? No. It's so frustrating, dude, because there's so many historical aspects of Mexican history, historical aspects of Mexican culture that are very interesting, dude. Like, I haven't finished the book yet, but I'm reading Chicano by Richard Villa, right? Richard Villa.
I think so.
Yeah. You can look at my huge library right there if you want. But
6 books.
6 books. But the story of Chicanos moving to, finding their place in California is very interesting. And like the book itself, if you ever get a chance to read Chicano, I'm sure it's on audiobook too. The story of Chicanos moving to not Inglewood, what is that other one? Irwindale. And beginning in Irwindale and then moving their way to East LA. And then, that all had to happen in order for these walkouts to happen, because the population of Mexicans that are first generation, moved into Boyle Heights and the areas around here. That are now being gentrified, right? Yeah. So we're allowed to have our moment, in 1968, 1969, whenever it was. But the injustice that was done back then just transforms into something else.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what people like don't realize of like why gentrification is such a big deal. Because you hear it a lot of times, even amongst Latinos, of like with Boyle Heights, because they're like, Boyle Heights is a historically Latino neighborhood, and they're like, well, the Jews were here first, like. This was a Jewish community. That's why it's called Boyle, But what a lot of people don't take into account is that these areas, East LA, Latinos were pushed.
Yeah.
They were forced to move here because of redlining, because of freeway expansion, because of eminent domain bullshit. And they were pushed to be here. So then they cultivated a community and a history here. And then now gentrification, it's like they ignore that. Like they people don't take that into consideration. And people still act like we don't fucking exist when they're in these spaces. We've been to different venues. It's so funny. We talked about this on Raccoon Titties.
So if you want to check out Raccoon Titties, it's Brendan Cooney's podcast. They had Dominic as a guest.
Yeah.
And you guys spoke about gentrification, especially in Lincoln Heights and Boyle Heights.
Yeah, in the comedy community.
Yeah. Did you want to say something?
Well, no, I mean, it was just along with what he was saying. It was just like, it is funny that people, one thing was like, it's funny when people that aren't white but are still outside the community also don't see it, but there are correlations. Like, it's the same thing that they did with, with like Harlem, where it's like they couldn't, for a lot of things, people couldn't go to like the major cities to do it, so they created their own environment to do it. And that's what we did with places like Boyle Heights.
Yeah. Yeah, and then people act like, they're just here, and they encourage outsiders to come through. They don't integrate themselves into the communities. That's the real issue, is that, like, if they try to integrate themselves, what people don't understand, too, is, like, okay, for instance, Mariachi Plaza in Boyle Heights.
Yeah.
That is a strong, tight-knit community, and particularly on that block. And the owners all know each other because they put in the effort to introduce themselves to each other and to like watch each other's backs. And then what started happening in the last 10 years was a lot of white people were putting like art spaces, fashion shops, coffee shops, all kinds of stuff. And they were, instead of introducing themselves and advertising in Boyle Heights and encouraging the community to come and partake in what they have to offer, they were inviting outsiders to come through, and they were inviting white people from other neighborhoods to come through. And then white people get there and act like, holy shit, I can't believe nobody's here. Meanwhile, it's a fucking whole population of brown people that they're just like not seeing.
Yeah.
And like, that's when rent rates go up. That's when property rates go up, and like people get priced out and they have to move.
Yeah, our friend Louis Lemus has a funny joke about that.
Oh, right.
How he saw his childhood city or town or whatever
Neighborhood.
There we go. Childhood neighborhood get gentrified just because there's two white guys on scooters driving by.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much stuff where it's like, or what's his name, Ronald Vara has that joke about how he has really good rent in Glassville Park, so he likes to smoke outside with his shirt off, so that he keeps the rent rates down.
Yeah, that was always an interesting thing about people who defend gentrification, because they're always like, well, it's renovation for the community, and it's like,
for which community?
Yeah, it's like they're not cleaning it up for the people that are there. Their version of cleaning it up is pushing out the people that are there,
right,
to make room for the people that are coming.
It's a lot of don't look, brush this under the rug. Because like I've heard Latinos, it's really sad because I've heard Latinos that I respect say like, do I think gentrification is bad? Obviously, but am I happy that my grandma doesn't have to worry about walking down the street? Or like we don't have to like sit below the windows, kind of a thing. And I understand that because I didn't grow up in a gang environment like that. Even though we're from Baldwin Park at one point in time was deemed like the most violent town in the country.
BP, homie.
Yep. And I'm unaffiliated. But by the time I was living there was gangs, but it was mostly for show. I think that they lost a lot of what the reasons why they got started. And anyway, not going into that, but I'm just saying like, yeah, there's less of that, but there's also like, it's just a new form of discrimination, and those people get pushed. They don't get reformed or helped, or it doesn't solve the issue. It just pushes it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Those people are going to go to Riverside. They're going to go to fucking Minnesota or Michigan. Like, there's a whole documentary about how the Midwest, how factories and corporations kind of like recruited Latinos from the West Coast and had them move over there for jobs.
Yeah.
And so it's like this stuff doesn't really get solved. And that's a big thing about like this movie and these protests and why I thought it was so important, because it's like this was the spark, you know, and this is what showed
the inciting incident.
Yeah, the inciting incident of like what it means to be a Chicano in this country. And I think it's just a reminder that like that politics, not necessarily politics, what's the word I'm trying to say, but like resistance is inherent to the Latino identity. From going back to when the fucking first colonizers came and landed in Latin America to today, you know, it's inherently like in our history, in our blood, in our DNA to fight for ourselves.
Yeah, man. And I wanted to talk about something else that I couldn't stop thinking about during walkouts. And you guys know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So this last week, I want to say this has been 4 days or 5 days now. Mm-hmm. Today is the 8th, right? Yeah. And on Saturday night, the 5th of March, there was a football game, soccer for Americans.
If you didn't
know, there was a soccer game between
because they got on Dominic last time for calling it soccer.
Football. Let's just say it's football.
Yeah.
You know, global football, not American football.
FIFA. The one where you kick it.
Yeah, the one where you kick it. You use your feet. Anyways,
what is it?
There was a soccer match between, I say soccer, fucking shit. Jesus Christ.
It sucks because of how serious this is about to get.
I know, okay. Yeah. So anyways, there was a football match between Queretaro and Atlas in Mexico, in the city of Queretaro, which is in Guanajuato, the state. Mm-hmm. And there was a mass casualty event at the soccer game where the fans did not agree with a call on the field, and so they started attacking each other. And it was barbaric and like animalistic the way that they treated each other. Mm-hmm. But then the national discussion, or the discussion,
the international discussion.
I thought you said the internet discussion, because that's what it was.
I mean, pretty much.
The discourse on Twitter was that Mexicans are barbaric due to this event. And it was kind of like a tell me how you really feel moment kind of thing.
Yeah.
And my issue with it is that a lot of Mexicans from Mexico were saying, take Mexico out of the World Cup. Like they should be sanctioned for this event, when it wasn't a state-sponsored activity. Because at the same time, Russia is being sanctioned as far as FIFA goes. Certain countries will not play Russia if they're in the World Cup.
Right.
You know? But that's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
Right? And it's silly to me that you would include Mexico in this kind of conversation of canceling them when comparatively these two things are both happening at the same time, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a crazy thing. Obviously, like, it's infuriating, it's tragic. It's something that should not have happened, and it's something that should not be dismissed or encouraged. Yeah. Like, nobody is saying like, who cares about these people that died? It's needless, especially over something as silly, as a soccer game.
Football.
Yeah. as a sports game.
Yeah, exactly. A sports match.
It's like it shouldn't be taken lightly, but people are trying to use it to their advantage.
There's no Mexican that's at home going, I'm glad that fucking happened, dude,
Yeah.
And to treat it as if anyone gets off to this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, and the thing is that like it doesn't just happen. Things like this don't just happen in brown countries or at just these types of events.
Yeah.
Like somebody pointed out. Well, first of all, Europe is racist as fuck.
Yeah.
And they don't ban any of their fans for throwing bananas on the field or for
saying the
N-word. They literally, like, there's a law that in Europe, or I think in England, that they're not allowed to use like glass anywhere, like in public, they have to serve things in plastic because people fucking get fucked up and stab each other with their cups.
Not to play like a comparative game here, because what happens in Europe, I'm sure they handle it in their own way.
Right.
But it's the discussion that's happening after the fact.
Right.
On the same day, by the way.
Right.
You know, which when you watch the videos, which I watched a lot of them, you know, of what happened in Queretaro, it's silly to just have a thought on it immediately, and you don't think about the people. Every single person you see on the ground naked because they declothed them, you know,
right.
Those people are a part of a family. You know what I mean? And to not have respect for the people that are dying just because they wanted to have a good night by going to a soccer game.
Right.
Football. But just because, you know, you see that and you don't see a person, you see an issue with the country because you felt a certain way beforehand, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it becomes, that's right.
Yeah.
It becomes a thing of the country, like it's their responsibility or it's a cultural thing. It's, you know...
The knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people was to fucking make Mexico pay for this in a way. Yeah. When it's like, you don't think they have... I should also point out, though, that, you know, the Mexican government was trying to downplay the whole situation by saying that nobody died, which is just not true. You know?
That part was weird. Like, I remember you had told us it, and you even sent the link, and it was like the local news was saying the people like it. But I then like was on Twitter, and I was Googling it, and none of the articles that were like American released said any of that. They were all like quoting the governor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big problem with American media in general, is that they tend to trust or cite state officials, government officials over anyone else.
Well, you got to also understand like the repercussions that the Mexican government is like future tripping on, you know?
Yeah.
Because 2026, 3 cities in Mexico compared to the 16 in America and the 3 in Canada are going to be hosting games for the World Cup.
Right.
And what's this year? 2022. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you're going to... There is no building back in some people's eyes. They want to disqualify Mexico from hosting anything in 2026, right? And that has economic repercussions for the country of Mexico.
Right.
Like being able to host a World Cup means your tourism goes up through the roof. You know, you get a lot more money coming in to Mexico.
Right.
And to just have that as a blanket statement, like, look what happened. This is what happens when you go to a Mexican soccer game. There's no nationally covered history of mass casualty events at soccer games in Mexico.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty hairy. I'm not gonna lie. Like, if you go to a game in Mexico, they fucking love their teams, dude.
But it's like that all over the world. Like,
exactly.
Like I don't want to bring up. I can't remember the cited article because it was used in school. Like, not for stars, but it was used for teaching us, like, assessment. But I remember in high school reading about this reporter who had never been to a soccer game in his life, and until going to one, didn't understand why... He was writing on why fights break out in European games.
Yeah.
And I think specifically, he was covering English games. And then he, like, described his entire, you know... time being at the game and like what it's like and how it's kind of just like raw and you know they have the toilet troughs, everyone is very close together, it's very tight knit, and then he describes this part where everyone's getting excited, the losing team is chanting against the winning team after the game, and he was like, I couldn't understand it, but he ends it with like at one point he's like, I couldn't understand, but even I was kind of I lost myself for a moment, and he says he remembers at first defending himself. And then later on at another point in that fight, he was the one looking for people to fight. He was like, you know, people lose themselves in situations like this because it's not a rational situation.
Yeah.
There's a psychological thing that happens. You know, mob mentality is real. It's easy for people to get swept up when you're in an environment like that. You share an energy, which, not to get all fucking existential and shit, but that's like a real thing.
Yeah.
Where it's a human instinct to go with the crowd and to follow what's happening. So if that's why you see like when a fight breaks out, like people they'll just punch the person next to them because that's what's going on, you know?
Yep.
It's stupid, but it's like, that's what happens.
Yeah.
And, there's alcohol involved. There's all kinds of stuff involved where people are not thinking rational and they get swept up. And yeah, it's not right. It's not right. But the rhetoric around it of saying that this is a cultural thing and that there should be the punishment that's being doled out in comparison where Russia is fucking attacking as a country.
Yeah. State sponsored invading another country. Yeah.
And killing civilians. Yeah. This is something that happened, that was out of officials' control.
I just wanted to have a chance to say that it's fucking stupid, first of all. The fact that they were able to get swept away like that, and then obviously that's spreading. But at the same side of things, if you look at Twitter and you see the ideals that are being shared on Twitter immediately, like I said before, the same thing happens there, where people are like, yeah, fucking Mexico should be out of the World Cup, When, first of all, I'm a huge soccer fan, and I think Mexico has a great chance this year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but the one thing that the country kind of rasterizes around is fucking football, dude. They love El Tri. They love the soccer team.
Right.
And to take that away from a country because of a couple of bad actors, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That fucking brutally hurt a lot of families,
Yeah. I mean, it's like somebody said, sorry if this is unrelated, but it just reminded me of like these tweets that popped up that were like, yeah, violence is tragic, but nobody's calling for banning concerts or for banning sporting events in other countries when stuff like this happens, when there's a mass shooting or there's any of that. Nobody's calling for anyone to be punished in this way, but it's always countries like Mexico that are deemed uncivilized.
Yeah. And also, what they're doing is Queretaro is now no longer affiliated with Liga MX, which is the Mexican Soccer League. And they'll never be accepted into the Mexican Soccer League again because of how the fans acted. But that's something that's being done in real life. But these imaginary thoughts that people have are driven by racism, in my opinion. That Mexican, like, first it was Mexico trending, right? And that's how I found out about it.
Yeah.
When I was at a quinceañera. Right?
Yeah.
And then it was Queretaro Atlas trending on Twitter the next day. And then on the third day, it's just Mexicans trending because so many people are tweeting about Mexicans.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
So watching it unfold over the last week has been really depressing to me because we also had a show on Sunday, which was great. Thank you for everyone that came out. But before going to the show, I'm watching all these videos and I'm looking at all these tweets and people saying some fucking wild shit online about Mexicans.
It's so crazy, especially in today's age where like there's a push for progressivism until something that they don't like pops up.
Yeah.
And then and then the racist heads, show up.
Nobody's going to nobody's going to take time to say like why this is happening. Why is Mexico so fucked up, dude? Like America can't let Mexico be itself in a way.
Yeah.
There's so much corruption and swindling. What is the word? Like, American fingers have been all over Mexico's government history.
Right.
And to say that we did this to ourselves and that this is, the state of Mexico is like this,
Right.
Is it's fucking racist as shit in my opinion.
Yeah, it's also ignoring like stuff like police brutality and corruption in the United States. Mm-hmm. It's no secret that like if everybody wants to point at the cartels running Mexico, but
that's a response.
Yeah. Not only that, but you're going to tell me that corporations don't run the United States? You're going to tell me that like they don't buy laws, that they don't buy politicians?
Yeah.
And that there's no corruption in the United States? It's dumb. It's,
What were you going to say?
I don't know. I kind of lost my place. One second.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of just like that thing of like, there's a scene in the movie, kind of relating it back to the movie, where what's her name? Paula is going over the questions she's going to ask people for the survey they're making, And she goes, "Do you want to go to school? Why not?" And Eula goes, "Why bother?"
Yeah.
It's like the thing is like they're not gonna. It's this idea that's being forced of like, well, this is how they are, so why bother trying to change it?
Yeah.
But it's a false ideal. It's like it's the same thing when you were saying about the people that just like get pushed out, where it's like, yeah, it's fixed here, but that they're doing that because they have nowhere else to go. There's no other options for them, and that's why people are fighting for it. It's not that they don't want it; it's that they don't have options.
And like I said at the beginning, is like I kept thinking about what happened in Queretaro while watching the movie, because the movie gives you a sense of like, you know, the quote of like, it was great to be a Chicano today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like feeling that Chicano pride, you know, I'm getting goosebumps right now.
Right.
You know, I'm so proud of being a Mexican.
Right.
But there's all these other reasons that people try to, in a way, just like, you know, just throw in as to why our country is fucked and why us as a people are inherently brutal and inherently animals, you know?
Yeah, and it's like they push for things. It's always like there's a responsibility of Latinos to be a certain way to everybody. And if we don't match up to some ideology, then all of that stuff gets thrown out the window. I mean, like, this is kind of a left turn. I'm kind of, you know, gonna kind of throw something at you guys real quick. But since we're on injustices, it's associated with this idea of like the Chicano or brown like perceptions of like, so on TikTok, I know on TikTok there's a thing. Do you know who Modern Warrior is?
I was gonna bring it up.
I think he made a TikTok about me.
What?
Did he?
I think for the colonizer thing.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
Modern Warrior is a native person from Colorado who's big on TikTok, and his content is all calling out white racists and stuff, and his catchphrase is "Hey colonizer," like that's what he's famous for.
Yeah.
So very briefly, there's a whole lot of drama that happened this week on TikTok between him and two other white creators, or a number of other white creators, where the short end of
it's kind of mostly one.
Well, there's one big person that's called Chelsea Hart. She's a comedian. She's a TikToker. She has like millions of followers, and so she calls out Modern Warrior because they started texting each other. They were confiding in each other. She went to go visit him in Denver. She's from Alaska. Went to go visit him. They had unprotected sex, and then she found out. She asked him if he was seeing anyone else, if he had slept with anyone else, and he said no. So she has sex with him, and then she finds out that he's talking to like 3 other people, and they all have the same story. Like he told her all the same things, and so she introduced this as like, this is assault because she didn't have informed consent.
Yeah.
Because if she would have known that he was sleeping with other people, she would have used protection, or she wouldn't have slept with him. And so he lied. And it became a really big drama where like a bunch of big TikTokers got involved, and people ran to jump on Chelsea Hart's side because she did this like big post and she was crying, and it really kind of turned me the wrong way when I was seeing these things, because like she had a ring light in all her videos. She had like a backing track music, and her videos felt scripted or rehearsed. And it's like a weird thing. What happened, it's still up in the air. Nobody really knows what happened from Modern Warrior's side. He was just like, no, this was just a casual thing, and there was bad communication between the two. That's not even the whole point of what I want to talk about, because the thing is that what happened is overshadowing something very serious that happened within the Native community and within the Chicano community, which is Clear Bear, who him and his brother Hatepa, and I forgot the other guy's name. They're also big on TikTok. They're one of the guys they wanted to be on the podcast. Remember I told you?
Oh, okay.
He kept asking all the time to be on the podcast. He would go on my live and Ryan's live asking to be on the podcast, and we were like, just wait, dude. But anyway, that dude invited. You can find out more information at Sienna.bat on TikTok and on Instagram, I think, to get the full story. But that dude, those brothers are like, have a reputation for manipulating women and for actually like assaulting, like trigger warning. But he got this girl drunk and took her to a secluded place and like took advantage of her. And because of the drama that was happening with Chelsea Hart and Modern Warrior, people ran to Chelsea Hart's side, and this story got buried. And these, nobody's talking about what's really going on because of like white tears. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. I just like this whole thing kind of reminded me of that, and just of how like as brown people.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It is comparable, or it's not comparable, but it is a good analogy. Like all of the aspects of what we were just talking about with the soccer versus the Ukraine situation
Football.
Is like this, where it's like, you know, you get the vibe that kind of he probably just like cheated on a bunch of people, which is just fucked up. It's a thing he did, and it's shitty, but it's not, you know, the same as like Claire Bear and the other two, where it's like that's a very serious situation that is now being blocked out because of what is essentially like TikTok drama between two people. Yeah.
It's just like, it's breakup drama being overshadowing everything else that's happening. It's like taking over the narrative, when like that thing with Hatepa is like his accounts got banned, but like nobody's talking about it. No, that dude can just pop up somewhere else, and like this stuff can keep happening. And it just sucks that like people are spending all this energy talking about this drama. Even now, you know, when it's like you could be helping people that really need it, but people flock to whiteness before anything else.
Yeah, and there's like a lot more about those guys that's like they're not actually, supposedly they're lying about their specific ties to indigenous people.
Yeah, they've claimed over 30 different tribes apparently.
They've done stuff where like they've forced themselves into sweat lodge ceremonies just to say that they were there, but they were never invited.
Yeah.
They crashed, like party crashed these ceremonies.
Yeah.
It's insane. And it's like a much more severe story, but yeah, it's being overshadowed by a breakup story, essentially.
Yeah. And it's just like, again, like I brought it up because it's like the whole thing of like ties to whiteness versus like the actual plight of natives and Chicanos and Mexicans.
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the overarching theme with all these things is that some people are terrible, dude.
Yeah.
You know? It has nothing to do with the nationality they carry.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's another thing of like, people looked up to Modern Warrior, people looked up to Hatepa and all this stuff, and they were quick when they find out that like, oh, Lance cheated on a bunch of things. His name's Lance, Modern Warrior. They cheated on people. People were quick to call him John Redcorn and to like make racist comments and stuff.
Yeah.
And people put it on other native creators and other Mexicans to comment on what was happening with that. All of the people that were demanding statements are white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. I fucking hate white people's hot takes, dog.
Yeah.
That shit's annoying. The hot take with Queretaro and Mexico was to get us out of the World Cup.
That was the other negative effect of this, is like they were trying to use Lance's situation to legitimize the idea that it's native men doing this. Because with that other situation, the problem is that those guys aren't true native, at least in the ways that they've claimed. And Lance is, and they're not the same, you know, they're not part of the same group.
Yeah.
But this allowed them to group them together and try to like legitimize the idea of it.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I threw that kind of out of left field, but it just like, it was also something that happened this weekend that like reminded me of like all of these three things kind of cultivate this idea that like as Chicanos and as natives, like we are like just pushed into a box.
But just like the movie said, and what was said at the fucking walkouts, is that the Mexican American people are a sleeping giant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I don't know if it's like fucking fiddled with or not, but like if we fight against each other, then we can never really unite together in a way.
Right.
And so think about it, dude. Next time you fucking want to shit on some Mexican, like a lot of Mexicans were shitting on Mexico, dude, for this Queretaro thing. And as if they had a valid point because they're Mexican. But I would ask that those people, like, you know, look at what they're saying and what they're doing and try to put your fucking culture first, dude. How is this going to help your culture? You're talking about yourself at the same time by saying that Mexicans are barbaric and animals. You know?
Yeah.
It's bullshit. It's this whole idea of an obsession of proximity to whiteness because they want to say, I'm not those Mexicans.
Yeah. Exactly.
I also think that's part of the whole. That's an aspect of the whole Chicano part, or the identifying as a Chicano, that is kind of important to the mentality of it. Is like Chicano was at one point a slur, and so I feel like the idea that started that mentality of like being proud of being Chicano is that it's like it. As a slur, like it doesn't matter how much you assimilate, to them you're just a Chicano, kind of a thing,
right?
Like I think that's an aspect that's also important to think about. Is like the reason that it's so important to unify is because it does, you know, the division doesn't benefit you; it only benefits them.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, because to them it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and that's like I said, we talked about it in an interview one time where I said that was my kind of like push towards my Mexican pride was literally racism. Like was literally like, because as growing up, I didn't feel connected to my culture. I didn't feel connected to being quote unquote Mexican. I didn't speak Spanish. I didn't know a lot about the music or what was going on in the country and stuff like that. So I kind of felt people would ask me like, do you see yourself as Mexican or American? And I was like, I see myself as myself. You know, I didn't like that question. But then as I went out into the world and worked in movies and worked, you know, just like outside of what I was used to and being around more white people, I was like, oh, they just see me as Mexican. Mm-hmm. Like that's how they're going to treat me this way no matter what. And that pushed me to really like learn about the struggle and learn about the communities and what people have going on and meet people that are like me that have all of my same interests and are Mexican and like want to share that culture.
Yeah, I think that's also why it's important to hold on to that stuff. Even if you're in a community that doesn't experience like you were saying, like more gang, it's important to be reminded of it. Because like I had a similar experience, and I think part of it is we grew up in an environment that was primarily Latino, so we almost like had a bubble of like we didn't need to think about that. Because like you go to the store and the people that are cashing you out are Mexican. You go to school, your teachers are Mexican. The principal is Mexican. The cops are Mexican. So you're never confronted with that until you leave that bubble.
Yeah. And sorry, do you have anything to say?
No.
So we were talking last night at Denny's, and I said, like, you know what's really sad was that in 5th grade, I did my president report on Andrew Jackson. And I was like, when I was in 5th grade, I was like, this fool is fucking sick, dude. For real, like, I honestly, I just thought it was cool that he was on the $20 bill.
Well, he also won a duel. That's pretty tight.
Yeah, he won a duel. He was, you know, a quote unquote badass general.
Yeah.
But like, even then, I learned about the Trail of Tears. And I, you know, have a distinct memory of like, at the time, I associated myself closer to the white government, American colonies, than I had to the native people that had to walk the Trail of Tears.
Yeah.
You know, I remember being taught American history as a kid and having that closer connection to the colonists that came from England, because even the teachers, they would say we.
Yeah.
They would say we came, and I'm like, we're all brown, that wasn't us.
Yeah.
We were already here.
Yeah.
That's what I liked about, we mentioned it in our it was a Cars episode that became the high school episode. But that's what I liked about Schmidt, is he would actually, like, he'd make it, he'd joke about it, but he would point out and be honest about the parts of, like, he was like, that's why it was funny, is because, like, in earlier history, you learn about Andrew Jackson, and he's kind of depicted as a war hero, but then you come into high school, and it turns out that he's the most hated president.
Yeah.
Like,
he's terrible.
He was the worst.
Yeah.
Anyways, well, if you made it this far in the episode, then tell us why you're proud to be Chicano, or why you're proud to be whatever you are.
Yeah, and if you saw the movie, tell us what your favorite part was.
Yeah.
I have a favorite part.
What?
It's because it's the most reminder that this is a TV movie that you'll see, is when they're trying to figure out what's going to be their next protest move. And then Paula is like, we can boycott school. We can just like, one guy's like, that's not going to work because people don't care if we go to school. And she's like, no, we'll go to school and then we'll leave. We'll walk out. And then everyone starts chanting it. But then she turns to
Moctezuma.
Moctezuma, and they both literally look at each other and they're like, it's a walkout.
Walkout.
It was like, it felt like they were, it felt like they were going to break into a dance number.
My favorite part of the movie, I had two. The Fernie part with the broom, and my other favorite part of the movie was when she went to go pee in the bushes. But
you see her papa.
Yeah, but they're still laughing.
Yeah. Well, that's what I wanted to say too when I was watching the movie. That's one of the things that I really liked about the movie, was that it was very serious, and obviously it's very political, and there are very ham-fisted moments. But one thing that I really appreciated about the depiction of what was going on was, one, the resilience of the students, but also the humor.
Yes.
The throughout, from beginning to end, the activists always found a way to find levity in what was going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a very good example of like Chicano culture is being being resilient and being able to
make a joke still.
Make a joke and spread positivity in our worst moments.
Que viva las nalgas.
Exactly.
Yeah, like that part was like a huge part of the movie where they're like saying like, fuck, they got us this time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they were like, well, if the informant's in here, then fuck you, Doug. And then people start snickering.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
que viva la panza. You know?
They weren't going to let them break their spirits.
Exactly.
That was awesome.
That's inherently Chicano and Mexican, in my opinion. Dealing with serious subjects and making a joke. You know?
Yeah.
What was your favorite part of the movie before we go?
Well, I mean, that whole idea. I think that scene. That scene where they find out that there's a snitch and they start going, fucking viva la panza.
You know what's funny about that is, if you look closely right before the camera cuts, the dude that I thought he was gonna rub his belly, he grabs his belly button here and yanks it.
That's so funny. See, shit like that. That's like, that thing is like stuff. I don't know. It's so simple, so silly, so stupid, but it's like pulling his belly hair is like, that's, I don't know how to explain it, but that's like Chicano humor of like finding the funniest angle in something.
Yeah. So yeah, if you've made it this far, please tell us either your favorite moment of the movie, or why you're proud to be whatever nationality you are.
Yeah.
But until next time, guys, don't fly.
Peace in my podcast.
Isimo, walk out. Walk out, Isimo. Walk out.
Hey, fool, I'm down with. Are you done to walk out, fool?
No, there's so much shit to navigate right now.
Walkout-Isimo.